Just give it a moment as the numbers build up. All right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this cold morning here in Nairobi. Those of you who are joining us in Nairobi, those who are joining us from other places in the globe or on the globe, we do welcome you to today's forum on unlocking public-private partnership opportunities. My name is Maxwell Okello. I'm the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce, and it is a delight to be hosting you all this morning. Kindly excuse us for the slight delay. However, we will catch up on time, and I am certain that today's session will be beneficial to you all. In terms of run of show, what can you expect during this 1 hour? I will get the session going with a brief opening remarks, and thereafter, we will have Christine Nganga, who's the Director, Origination and Structuring at the PPP Directorate, to give us a presentation on the PPP framework and opportunities. Thereafter, we will invite Dr. Olufunso Somorin, who's the Regional Principal Officer at the Africa Development Bank, who's going to take us through the financing tools for PPP project presentation. Thereafter, we will have a moderated Q&A, and so we encourage each and every one of you, if you have questions, to submit them in the Q&A tab on your screen. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to get us going and welcome you once again, our members, distinguished guests, partners. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually for today's forum on unlocking public-private partnership opportunities. While we may not be in the same room, this conversation couldn't be more timely or more important as Kenya continues to shape its economic future. As Vision 2030 and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda gather pace, PPPs are becoming essential tools to help us deliver the infrastructure and services our country needs quickly, sustainably, and inclusively. As many of you in this virtual room know, whether leaders, investors, innovators, this is the moment that represents a unique window of opportunity. There's a growing pipeline of projects in sectors like energy, healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, and digital. And there are more tools than ever to help de-risk and finance these opportunities. We are excited to have two outstanding speakers joining us today to bring this to life. As I mentioned earlier, Christine Nganga, who's the Director of Origination and Structuring at the PPP Directorate, which is under the National Treasury, and Dr. Olufunso Somorin, the Regional Principal Officer at the African Development Bank. Thank you both for being with us today for this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that today gives you a clear view of Kenya's PPP landscape, where the investable opportunities are, how to engage, and how both public and private sectors can partner more effectively to drive impact. Please feel free to drop your thoughts or questions in the Q&A tab, as I mentioned, throughout the session. We want this to be as interactive, informative, and as practical as possible. And with that, I want to get this show on the road, and I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Christine Nganga, who will walk us through Kenya's PPP framework and the exciting opportunities ahead. And as she comes on, I want to very quickly just highlight her biography. Christine Nganga is the Director origination and structuring at the PPP Directorate, and has accumulated over 22 years experience in corporate and project finance, public investment banking, public-private partnerships, and economic development advisory work. Previously, she was the managing director at Strategia Advisors, where she was part of the Konza Technopolis Master Development Partner 2 Consortium, responsible for delivering the economic and financial model for the first 400 acres, that is phase 1 of the project. She also supported the USAID East Africa Trade and Investment Hub in effecting their project appraisal and investment facilitation strategy across Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Mauritius, and Madagascar. Prior to that, she worked in deals advisory at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Kenya, where she focused on M&A, capital raising, public-private partnerships, valuation, and due diligence. She has also served as Assistant Vice President at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where she was responsible for municipal bond issuances for a portfolio of infrastructure development projects and helped structure PPPs in the manufacturing, real estate, healthcare, rail, education, and leisure sectors. She currently serves as an INED on the East Africa Reinsurance Company Board and has also served as board chair of Sanlam General Insurance Kenya. She was former board member of the Regional Economic Development Assistance Corporation in New York and has also served as assistant secretary of the New York City Industrial Development Agency, a bond issuing authority. She is also an Eisenhower Global Fellow and an Aspen Institute Socrates Scholar. She holds a BA in Economics and Political Studies from Trent University in Canada and an MPA in Policy and Finance from New York University and a postgraduate diploma in e-commerce and internet technologies from Seneca College in Canada. Welcome, Christine. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss PPPs, the exciting landscape that is emerging in PPPs. And I'm also delighted to be co-presenting with my friend, Dr. Funzo Somarin, who's also an Eisenhower Fellow. I'll share my presentation now. Please confirm that it's visible.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So today I'll be giving you an overview of the PPP landscape in Kenya. I work at the Directorate, PPP Directorate, as mentioned. And first slide is just a highlight of our presentation outline. I'll go into an introduction of PPPs and the legal framework within Kenya, and then speak at a high level on the PPP features, and end with a sense of the pipeline that we have currently. So the PPPs are essentially a long-term contracts between public and private parties, so between the private party and government to provide a public asset. Basically, the key feature is the risk sharing that occurs in the process. The private party bears significant risk and management responsibility, and for that, then gets remunerated. Of course, PPPs are an offshoot mainly of project financing structures. So what is that? What is project finance? That's a long-term infrastructure, financing of long-term infrastructure through a limited or non-recourse financing structure. Usually there's debt and equity involved in the financing structure, and the payment is on the basis of the cash flows of the project. So the PPP Directorate at the National Treasury in Kenya provides technical support to government ministries and departments, as well as counties and other agencies, to appraise projects and structure them as PPP contracts. So you can look at us as the trusted advisor to the various entities as they engage with private parties or as they contemplate undertaking a project through PPP procurement. PPPs must provide value for money. That's a key thing we look. So we analyze how much it would cost the project, both quantitatively and also qualitative aspects, how much it would cost to do the project under normal procurement through government, where government is carrying out the whole project, or where you involve the private party. The project must be affordable, and by this we're talking about to government, if government is the payer. PPPs are based on either a user pay model or a government pay model. And so in a government pay model, it has to be a payment that government is able to afford across different political cycles, because over several years. So it's something that the budget can withstand across, not just the first year of the project, but these are long-term projects. So it is something that should be able to be budgeted for across several years. In the case of user pay, of course, it has to have a certain level of affordability for the users. When you think of a PPP in healthcare or water service provision, or even tolling, these are transfer, and we'll discuss that a little is important, and I'll discuss that further in a follow-up slide. And of course, we must look at the environmental and social sustainability of the project. Now, just a highlight on the institutional framework. At the PPP Directorate, we have on the left side, there's a contracting authority institutional framework. So this is when you see the section S31, etc. Those are sections of the PPP Act 2021 that detail the information with regards to that aspect of the legal framework. So what happens is, in a case of a competitive project, a contracting authority must initiate the project, and they must do so in a context of a national development plan. What we mean is like Vision 2030, which is our plan, the medium term, the MTP4, which is where we are with medium term plan, which is just about to conclude. And of course, for this administration, the beta agenda, bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And once they determine a project is sort of fitting within that framework, they would want to develop a concept note. And once they've done that, they submit it to the National Treasury. This is evaluated as to whether it's a project that will go on budget or off budget. And that would then be a PPP structure. So there's a committee that would evaluate the appropriate procurement structure for that. And if it comes to the PPP Directorate at that point, then we engage to ensure that they develop relevant terms of reference that lead to the development of an RFP for competitive process of procurement. So at each stage of the RFP, there's a team that's set up, that's a project implementation team, and there's a pre-qualification committee that would then review what responses come from the RFP. That team also reviews the evaluates the project itself. And if that is also approved, it goes into negotiation. There's a negotiation committee that is set up to then negotiate with a bidder. I've sort of scanned through that real fast, but essentially at each one of these points, there is an approval from the PPP committee. Now, if we look at the right side, you can see the PPP committee in the first box. The PPP Directorate serves as the secretary to the committee. So we process all the documentation, we carry out the evaluations, we provide all the support to the government agencies to get to that point. And we basically, for project that is found to be something that we would like to pursue, it is presented to the committee and the committee takes the decision. Essentially, the PPP committee is like the board, or you would want to say something like the investment committee. And of course, if there's anyone that has an issue with the process, there's redress through the petitions committee. Cabinet we have a dotted line, reporting line to Cabinet, where we inform them periodically annually on the projects that have been approved and the projects that are officially in our pipeline. This is just a quick framework. We won't go into the details, but the evolution of the PPP institutional framework. So as you can see, in 2011, there was the first PPP policy that was developed that led to the 2013 PPP Act. And that was the act under which PPPs were pursued up until 2021. However, there was a major review of the act because there was a challenge in actually closing transactions due to several bottlenecks. The key ones being too many approvals required, and also there was need for clarity around certain aspects such as transfer of public assets to a private party for the term of the contract, and also just clarity on the roles of the different under the different approvals. So for cabinet, before there was cabinet, there was parliament, and those were eliminated from the approval process. And this has led to really a major uptick in the projects that we're able to support and actually take to close. So right now we're under the 2021 Act. Now, a few key features just for those who are not familiar with PPPs. Some of the key features you find is bundling of project components into a single procurement. So you find that the design, the construction, and the operation and maintenance end up being done by a single party, which in an EPC contract would be potentially three different parties. There's a single private partner responsible for the projects. So that's because the private party comes as a consortium, and at contracting, you would set up a special purpose vehicle to deliver on the project. Thirdly, it's a long-term contract. Our contracts as long as 30 years, but they could be shorter. This is all determined by the economics of the project and we expect, based on the financial model, when we expect the private party to have recouped their investment and made a decent return for them to then exit. There's greater risk transfer to the private party, as mentioned, because of the transfer of design and construction risk, as well as operation and maintenance risk. That is transferred to the private party, and for that they get the remuneration. Also, private sector financing then is introduced, and this is the aspect of it getting off balance sheet, and that, of course, then relieves the fiscal space for government. And also allows for more tailored financing structures that could serve the project better. Of course, payment for performance is a key metric. So in the private party is paid based on performance. So if a road is available and well maintained, they would get their full fee. If for some reason there are aspects that were anticipated as required and are not delivered, then there would be a scaling of the fee, a discount on the fee. So this is a typical risk allocation matrix, just for your understanding. Often the financing, design risk, construction risk would then be with the private party. Land acquisition, permitting, certain permitting will sit with government, but also there's permitting that the private party would be involved in. I should mention, though, land acquisition, sometimes we have found that we've had it sit with a private party to ensure no delays in the project, but that is then rolled into the cost of the project. And therefore, repayment includes the land acquisition costs. O&M, of course, will sit with the private party. If there's force majeure events, that would sit with both parties. On the private party, because they can acquire some insurance to sort of lower the force majeure costs. But of course, government also will take on that risk. Demand risk, inflation, forex, often can be negotiated. All depends on the project and whether it does make sense for a private party to take up full risk. Political risk, as you can see, change in legal framework, environmental and social risks sit with government, but some of the environmental and social risk will sit with a private party where they can actually, again, take on insurances or even just through community engagement, managing certain social aspects that may arise. So that is all. This is typical, and this is how the risks would be shared in the final project agreement. I will not go into too much detail on this, but this is just to show you a typical structure. This particular one is drawn from a transmission project structure. So typically you'll have the contracting authority right here that is the one that is going to contract with the SPV. Now, the SPV is the private party, and they do sign a project agreement. It could be a build, operate, transfer. It could be a build, own, operate, transfer. It could be a concession, depending on what sector the project is. In this case, it's a BOT. You can see there's a regulator who would approve a tariff. In this case, we're talking about in the energy sector. You can see an off-taker, in this case, who would have signed an off-take agreement with a special purpose vehicle. And then, of course, users are paying a tariff to the off-taker, who then would remit funds to the special purpose vehicle. For the SPV, they would have gotten loans from lenders. They would also have a shareholder agreement with equity investors. And then they would sign O&M contracts with an O&M service provider, an EPC contract with a contractor of the project. And of course, there'd be an EPC contractor JV, an interface agreement between the EPC and the O&M to ensure that all manner of the interface risk is managed. And of course, there could be multiple EPC contractors. Apologies, I was trying to see how to get back to my presentation. Just one moment. There we go. So in terms of the PPP life cycle, this is the process that we go through on every project that we're undertaking. So as I mentioned earlier, at the inception stage, there's a project identification and prioritization process that happens, and that is when the concept note is submitted by the contracting authority. We will discuss later the different procurement methods, but this one is assuming a competitive procurement method. So the contracting authority submits a concept note, which is evaluated and appraised at a high level. And this is then taken to the PPP committee for approval. And that approval is to go to develop a feasibility study on the project. And that is done. When that is done, the feasibility report is then again reviewed, evaluated, and if found to be adequate, then submitted to the PPP committee again for approval to go through a procurement process. And this, we normally do a two-stage procurement process. So there's the RFQ, request for qualification, and then a request for proposals. And on what is submitted, the winning bidder then gets to negotiate a project agreement. And after that, we go into the development phase, whereby the private party then begins the construction of the project. and the maintenance of the project for the life of the project. Could be a 30-year project. And then, of course, then there's the exit at the end of the project, and that is the handover phase. Now, procurement methods as to the PPP, as per the PPP Act. There are 4 procurement methods. The first one is direct procurement, which we do not use very often because this is really for specialized situations, for example, a PPP related to national security, etc. Privately initiated proposals, which is what we call also an unsolicited bid, where a private party actually engages us and proposes the project. They would actually first engage the contracting authority. There's restricted bidding, where we know a limited universe of potential project developers can handle the project, or there might be some urgency to the procurement. Again, this is not very often used. And of course, the most common and preferred is the competitive bidding process, which I just described. Different arrangements are described in the law. Some of them are, they're not all mutually exclusive. So you'll see there's the build, own, operate, transfer, build, operate, transfer. I'll just let you have a look at that briefly, but you can see, for example, a joint venture could be a concession, or it could be a management contract. But essentially, those are the ones as defined in the law. Now, quickly to a project pipeline. I'll start off with our successes. This is not part of the pipeline, but really the projects that are operational so far under the PPP Act. We have a number of road projects, largely because roads were the sort of pioneer sector. The road sector was a pioneer sector in Kenya for PPPs. And so we have they mentioned Lot 3, Lot 15, Lot 18, but essentially we have Ngong Kizen Road, we have a road in Marua, and of course we all know, those in Nairobi know the Nairobi Expressway, because many of us have really seen an improvement in traffic and congestion in the downtown area by bypassing the traffic using the expressway. We also have 3 geothermal plants. There's Sosian, Quantum, and Ore Power, which are all in the Menengai area. So that's 105 megawatts of power. And then we have a housing that we have done for the Kenya Defense Forces under the PPP structure. Current project pipeline. So these are projects that you can see on the right the status of the project. The Kenyatta University Hostels is at commercial close. There is the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, which we're currently doing the procurement, so it's going through the RFP process. We have student housing again at the Nairobi University. And then we have a privately initiated proposal that we're currently reviewing for the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway, which is an alternate route to the current Mombasa Road A8. And we have supply of smart driving licenses and associated services. This is one for provision of digital driver's licenses, which we are already in the market, but this is to ramp it up. And in addition to this, it's also going to be, it has a fining system for, what are considered small fines related to driving infractions. And so right now it's in a pilot phase. At the same time, we were evaluating, and this is something that negotiation should be finalized soon. Current project additional pipeline is, again, I'll go through water sector. There's Sabaki Water Carrier Project, which is also a privately initiated proposal. Very unique because the proponent is looking to do everything from upstream water abstraction, bulk water, all the way to last mile metering and, to the final consumer. And that is in the coast area. Then there's Londiani Dam, which is going through the feasibility phase. There's Lamu Water Desalination, which is also in the feasibility actually that has been concluded and is being submitted for review. There's Galana Kulalu. This project has reached commercial close, again, privately initiated, and working towards the financial close. But the project is 20,000 acres of production, irrigation and production of maize in the Galana Kulalu area. High Grand Falls, this is a project that is privately initiated, that is under review. Then there's the Tana Delta Integrated Project. This is a feasibility. This is going to be a competitive one where we're conducting a feasibility to assess the highest and best use of the land in terms of the different crops that can be placed there, as well as value addition. In the energy sector, we have the Africa 50 transmission lines. And this is actually we're going to get to, this is a negotiation, and negotiation is just concluding actually this week. And so we should be signing an agreement in the next little while. And this is the first transmission line PPP in Kenya, which we're quite proud of. University of Nairobi Cancer Center, this is again a feasibility study being conducted by us, and it will be going to market as a competitive process. Pwani Teaching and Referral, same thing. It's a competitive one that will be coming to market soon. Priority projects for the fiscal year starting July 2025 are the following for us. These are privately initiated. There's the Sabaki Water, which I mentioned, but there's also SEZ Water, which is, as you see, is a privately initiated project. There's the Nairobi Nakuru Mau Summit project, which is been in the news quite a bit, looking to resolve the major traffic issues as you head in that direction towards Eldred. Then there's the airport concession, which is another priority project. It is being reconstituted to also consider all the other airports, so that we're considering the feasibility from a hub and spoke model, as opposed to just the renovation and expansion of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. There's the Mombasa Lamu Port concession. Currently, we have a transaction advisory RFP that was out and concluded recently to redevelop the RFP. This project had been in the market earlier. There was a lot of feedback that was provided, and it's being restructured as well. There were, of course, a couple of issues around legal challenges, which have now been resolved, and so we're ready to go back to market on that. As mentioned, High Grand Falls is one that there's a feasibility study that is under review. Usahihi Expressway, we've discussed that, and the smart driving license. There are also other feasibilities that are ongoing in this year, so all these will be coming to market on a competitive basis. So as you can see, there's housing, there's street lighting, more accommodation, more healthcare, and we have a lot of projects that are making their way into the pipeline related to agriculture and agro-processing. These are procurements, transaction advisor procurements that are ongoing, which then get us to the point where these projects will get to go to market in the next phase. So we have a lot more transmission lines coming through, not as privately initiated, but as competitive, more housing, and CPP asset monetization. This is the National Cereals and Produce Board. It's about upgrading the warehousing and having a private party run them so that they can run more efficiently. There's a bulk water supply in the Taita Taveta area. We're looking into setting up of a spaceport in the coastal area, and there's more staff housing for the prisons, for the disciplined forces. that would be the end, but as I conclude, I would just want to point out that at the end of the day, our key priority areas, you can see where the sectors are. It's energy, it's water, it's transport. And in transport, it's fairly broad, not just roads, but also rail and airports and mass transit. And of course, agriculture, agribusiness, and housing. But really, we are sector agnostic. And projects come because some projects can come privately initiated that are not things that have been anticipated, and those we would review. And let me stop my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for that very comprehensive presentation. We will get back to you shortly. I want to very quickly turn over to Dr. Somorin. As Dr. Somorin is putting up his presentation, I'll very briefly give his bio. Dr. Olufunso Somorin is the Regional Principal Officer at the Africa Development Bank. He leads the bank's work on climate change and green growth in 13 countries of the bank's Eastern African region. He also leads the bank's carbon markets program and strategic dialogues with public and private institutions on climate policy frameworks, climate finance, nature or biodiversity finance, and green industrialization. Between 2013 and 2017, he coordinated the bank's work on addressing fragility and building resilience within the Horn of Africa. In the last 14 years at the bank, he has been directly involved in the design, appraisal, and supervision of more than 300 development projects across multiple sectors. Dr. Somorin has written more than 50 publications on climate policy in Africa. He holds a PhD in international environmental policy from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and an emeritus Mundus scholar as an Erasmus, excuse me. Somorin, these are crazy terms you have here. As an Erasmus Mundus scholar, he holds 2 Masters of Science degrees from Finland and the Netherlands. He's an executive education alumnus of Bradford, Cambridge, and Oxford universities in the UK and the University of California, Berkeley in the USA. He gives guest lectures at King's College London and Strathmore University here in Kenya. Somorin is currently an unresident fellow at the Africa Policy Research Institute in Berlin. He's also a recipient of several international awards and recognitions, including the prestigious Eisenhower Fellowship in the US for his work on climate policy in Africa. He's currently serving on the UN Secretary General's Task Force Expert Group on Net Zero Policy. Dr. Somorin, over to you. I know we are running behind on time, and I just ask members and our guests to please indulge us with an extra 10 minutes past the hour so that we're able to take questions after this. So go ahead, Somorin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maxwell. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. It's such a pleasure to be here. It was so difficult to accept to speak, but I just couldn't miss it because we are having a very timely conversation. And thank you, Christine, for setting the scene pretty well. Why is it a timely conversation? What we are discussing here in this virtual forum, it's happening in the boardrooms, it's happening within economic management teams of countries, it's happening at the global financial structures globally, but also it's happening at highest level of summit discussion. And I really want to commend the leadership of these American Chambers of Commerce, Kenya, for thinking around this. Now, thank you again, Christine, because you've made a lot of my work easier. So I'm not going to set the context. You've done that very well. I just want to talk about the financing part of this. And look, as we go into this conversation, I want to say 2 things that are very fundamental. Number one is for us to agree in this room that when it comes to global financing for infrastructure or development projects on the continent or anywhere globally, we are not dealing with scarcity challenge. The challenge we're dealing with is not the scarcity of capital or the inadequacy of capital. The challenge we're dealing with is the lack of or distribution crisis of capital. And I'm going to explain that because it makes the rest of the conversation a lot easier. It is not a scarcity problem, it's a distribution problem. Money or finance, whatever it is not necessarily scarce. It is just not evenly distributed. So whilst there are regions of the world or countries of the world that capital is not necessarily abundant, and yet they have a massive need or demand for that capital, in another part of the world, there's an abundance of capital where there may not be necessarily high demand for them. So the problem we're trying to solve, the innovation we're trying to solve, is to move capital from where it is most abundant to where it is most needed. And please keep that in mind. And that's a distribution crisis that you're solving, not a scarcity crisis. The reason I wanted to emphasize this is the moment we believe the narrative that money is not available, money is scarce, then the way we respond to it, unfortunately, is different. But the moment we know that it is not scarce, it is just not evenly distributed. So we want to create a facilitating modality or a kind of a conveying vehicle that brings capital from where it is most abundant to where it is most needed. And it doesn't have to be between North and South. It can be within a country where there's an abundance of capital seated in one part of the country, and there is a demand for capital in another part of the same country. So the PPP conversation, it's very much targeted at solving that problem. And please keep that in mind as we go forward. And the second part of it is AFDB, and together with other multilateral development banks and all of the innovativeness you hear in the world of finance, within DFIs, within commercial institutes, we are all trying to solve that problem. Move capital to where it is most needed and where it can deliver the greatest value. And the key word is value. The value could mean returns for a private person. The value could mean a development result for a public person. And the most important thing is managing that transition. So what we've done in the AFDB, and I want to put you, and I'm very mindful of time, is we created a PPP strategic framework for a 10-year period. So from 2021 to 2031. And the goal is simple. The goal is basically to just scale up financing for economic and social infrastructure. Now, our focus is largely infrastructure, but we thought and we strongly believe that that has to happen with high level or increased private sector participation. The policy space, the public sector space has got a lot to do, but the quantum of capital needed is sitting mostly in the private capital space. So here's our approach. We have three-layered approach in our framework. That is what we call the upstream support. And now let me say this, and please, in addition to the fact that we're solving a distribution crisis, it's also important to understand that finance and whatever structure or whatever instrument you know about or you're interested in, it doesn't start when we sign checks. It actually starts when the environment for it to happen is in place. So everything Christian has really put in place for us is that powerful, is that enabling environment that makes it possible. Outside that enabling environment, transactions may still take place, but it's not structured. It has a lot of risk, and it's not able to, we may not be able to attribute the value to overall economic development of a country, say Kenya. So it's very important for us as a development financial institution. The upstream support is very important because when you have the policy, the regulatory, and the legal frameworks in place, the rest of the layers become a lot easier. The second layer is the midstream support. So it is not just enough to have a good policy in place. I also want to say this. Look, and we all have to agree here that even the best of financing tools, or best of financing instruments, cannot substitute for a bad project. The starting point of financial availability is beyond the enabling environment, is the ability to develop a good project. And nothing can substitute for that. And so we sequence our support along this layer. So we invest a lot in project preparation and transaction advisory. And it's very important to appreciate the value of putting resources on the table to do very high quality feasibility studies, having that conversation around structuring deals. What does this agreement mean? Who is doing what? What are the legal parameters in place? How do we manage risk? How do we share or spread risk? All of those conversations, and you may not see them, they are the mundane things behind the scene. You may just see the infrastructure, but they are critical for the infrastructure. The downstream support, the third one, is the financing itself. And we use a mix or a menu of different instruments at the bank to do that. So this is basically what I want to take you through, just to help you understand. What are the tools? So for the bank, we have a range of tools. Some are linked to direct financing. So basically, we provided a loan, equity, or line of credit. And it could be to the public component, the public actor in the PPP, or it could be to the private actor in the PPP. And if you remember the table that Christine showed about taking public or private, all of those key parameters, there are different layers of instrument that can speak to different actors within the partnership. The second option is a blended finance, a special funds. The third one is risk management products. Technical assistance is very important, and the regulatory support. So basically, all the layers that I talked about, we break them down into instruments. So in the interest of time, let's take them one after the other. The easiest part, well, not the easiest, the most that most people know is, look, the bank is supporting this. And so in the energy portfolio that Christine showed, the Geothermal Development Corporation projects. So that on the public side, the bank invested about $100 million in the exploration and all of the policy-related work for GDC. Actually, in the private sector side, for the three different private players, on power, all power, quantum, and the bank is involved in all of them in providing kinds of instruments to them. It's the same for road and all and the others. So it's very important that you can provide direct financing, different instruments. The public sector may be able to get access to grant and concessional loans, whereas the private sector within the partnership may be able to get equity investment or even line of credit. So this is something that is very important. And we have different types of loans, and they are priced differently. There are those that are commercial, but still very competitive. And there are those that are sovereign guarantee that you will lend to the public sector, usually the government. So now let me say again that we will make the presentations available for all of you just to reflect on, because we're mindful of time. The second tool is, it's a range of financial instruments around blended finance and special funds. So there are structures, there are projects that will require that you are able to draw capital from a standalone facility that is only focused on doing that type of transaction or that type of sector. So we've got a range of them. We've got those for education, for agriculture, for energy, and the likes. They're largely using blending concessional loans from AFDB, which could be for 30 to 40 years. And usually that will cover the lifespan of most infrastructure projects. You can actually blend that with philanthropic capital. We're able to bring our convening power to bring different actors around the table to be able to support that. And you make sure that you de-risk the project, and you take to the extent that even private capital becomes is attracted to investing in projects and maximizing financial leverage. There are examples of those. Time will not allow us to go through them one after the other. I want to focus a little bit on what I call risk management products. And because this is very important, and usually on the African continent, managing risk is as important as the ability to even raise the capital or even structure the deal. And on a front-leaning thinking around what is risk, whether it's real risk or perceived risk, and what kind of instruments are available to manage them, both on the public side, like political risk, or on the private side, like credit risk. So what we do at the bank is we've created a number of guarantee instruments. There's a PRG, political risk, partial risk guarantees, PRGs, but also there are partial credit guarantees. One is for the public, the other one is for private. And and look, because Christian, you actually showed this in a conceptual form, and we can actually put this in terms of what it would look like if AFDB were to be involved. You working with a commercial bank, the project company here would be the SPV that you saw, but also government engagement in it. Let's use a physical example. Many of you know the Lake Turkana wind power project in Kenya, and it was a very unique project because 310 at some point, and I think it still is one of the largest wind power farms on the continent. But it was also structured in a way that you have multiple private sector involved in the SPV. And what what AFDB did was to be able to provide the partial risk guarantee. Basically, to assure the private capital and private players in the project that in the event of some form of contractual obligation breakdown from the public side, we are putting this pool of capital aside to be able to respond to that. And that helps in the private sector pricing, but it also helps in the financial viability of the project and all. The partial credit guarantee is usually for commercial, and we can either provide it to the financial institution that is involved in the project through the private sector that is interested in structuring and financing the project, usually not for government. Now, this part is always we've talked about it, and you imagine sometimes it usually comes before, but it's very important to know that AFDB, together with other African DFIs and other African institutions, have created a pool of project preparation facilities that you can tap into. Usually, the public sector side, depending on how the PPP is structured, the public sector side is able to tap into that and invest in the upfront feasibility studies, some of the early investment in capacity building, or even advisory services like paying legal fees or structuring the elements of the project. There are a few examples, and I'm running out of time. Some of them we've been alluded to them. We talked about Menengai. We've talked about the road project. We are also Katrako PPP in agriculture, so across different scales. So this is from AFDB in Kenya, but for the ongoing project. But also when we look at our pipeline, it's becoming a practice because it's very important. And I'll say this in the closing, and this is my final slide. If in the past, if a government has got up, say, $1 billion for a development project in 1 year, for instance, $1 billion say in 1 year, it doesn't make sense in a country that has enormous development needs to put that $1 billion available for development projects in 1 year into 2 projects or 3 projects at max. It doesn't make sense. That capital can actually become the catalytic capital to be able to attract private capital. That $1 billion could attract $9 billion of private capital and other forms of capital to be able to do projects in that year worth about $10 billion, as opposed structuring the development investment in that country to just $1 billion. And that is the power of a PPP, that you can multiply, you can achieve scale, but you can combine that scale with the speed of development that needs to happen on the ground. So how do we partner? For members who are listening here, there are opportunities to de-risk your investment through the instrument that we have. There are opportunities to leverage some of the windows. We have standalone dedicated windows. We've got tools of financing opportunity. The AFDB, similar to the World Bank, is like a massive house with plenty doors and plenty windows. It's always important to know which door should you knock on to be able to get the right access to the kind of partnership that you need. I know because of time, but thank you very much. This is the beginning of a long conversation. I'm hoping we can take this forward and come back another time for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Somorin. That was just excellent in terms of outlining some of the financial tools that are available to support PPP projects. So I'm going to quickly jump into the Q&A segment of today's session, and I can see there are several questions that have come through in the Q&A tab. I will try my best to get us to go through them. However, if we run out of time, because I do understand we have until 11:15, so we have exactly 15 minutes out of time, we will take these questions away, some of the questions away, and we'll be able to, together with Christine and Dr. Somarin, be able to provide you with written responses subsequently. So I'll just go down the list here, depending on relevance. The first question is, what is the appetite for PPPs in green infrastructure projects that are primarily biodiversity oriented? And that this is coming from the point of view that it seems like it's easier to do PPP projects for renewable energy projects. I think this will go to you, Christine, and Dr. Somarin, you can also jump in as necessary. Then we'll take the next.
Thank you. In terms of green projects, actually, our whole pipeline, we're in the process of climate proofing our whole pipeline of projects. So we actually work closely with the climate finance department within the Treasury. And for all projects that have in water and energy, because of course, as in Kenya, we have our and also in housing, we're looking at that because we also are keen to unlock other sources of financing, including climate financing. So I would say it's not just the renewable, but all sectors. We're looking at the greening of the pipeline. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you. I think that's very important, and I really commend the leadership and the government to climate-proof all investment projects, and that is very fundamental. Look, over history, money has always taken different forms or different color. At the point it was trade by barter, at the point it was cowries and that. Today's money has got a color, and the color is becoming green. So there's a notion of green finance or even blue finance. And basically, we need to be able to take advantage of that. There's an opportunity today where carbon credits, if it's green, or nature credits from your project can earn additional financial returns. And when you have that into the balance, into the financial structuring of the project, they actually even increase the viability of the project. So it's a very massive opportunity for us. The carbon market globally is a 1 trillion economy. And I think we should do more to tap into that. And we should find means that every of our projects must be green. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is on PIPs, so privately initiated projects. And the question is asking, what is the practical process for PIPs to meet a potential project and partner with a public institution for a PPP? Christine?
Sure. For a privately initiated proposal, I would encourage anyone looking to do that to conduct a strong feasibility study. I know you wouldn't do the full feasibility study without direction of whether this is a project that's going to move, but at the concept stage, anticipating what that project is, then there needs to be a fairly robust pre-feasibility, a very good sense of what your team looks like to ensure that you have the technical capacity, financial capacity, that the regulatory framework can support your project, or at least there's a path to getting there if there needs to be some legal or regulatory aspects that are changed. And essentially, of course, understanding the environmental and social aspects. Certain projects, for example, road projects, some water projects, even transmission, have a major aspect of right-of-way acquisition and therefore have a lot of project-affected persons. And therefore, a good understanding of what that looks like is important very early on. Deeper studies can be done later. Beyond that, for privately initiated proposal is to ensure that the project, there's some uniqueness in it that makes it challenging for that project to be done on a competitive basis. Because if it is something that can go competitive, then we would lean towards that to ensure that we're getting value for money. So the case for it to be privately initiated needs to be strong. Again, affordability, as any other project, we would still be looking at affordability, whether it's to government or to private users that are using that infrastructure. That is key. So I'd say they would need to look into that, all that a little comprehensively, and we're happy to engage and have that conversation early on if somebody wants to, is in the stage of conceptualizing a project. But ultimately, the project would need to be submitted to the relevant contracting authority because their approval, they're the ones that will be signing that contract.
All right. And Christine, who undertakes the feasibility? Is it the developer themselves, or are there certain third parties who are maybe on a roster somewhere that are recognized to be objective, and so they would undertake the feasibility studies? How does that work?
For a privately initiated proposal, it is, from our perspective, it is the private party. So whoever they engage is up to them because it's their own private contract to make sure that they get the right person who knows how to do that. There isn't a list because, again, we cannot provide a list. There are very many different sectors, people that specialize in different areas. But I think any private party doing that needs to get a party that is that is already recognized to have done good work in this. They probably had previous experience in developing those feasibility studies. So that happens fully at the cost of the private party. Of course, as that is going on in the phase where we're doing as they're doing that feasibility, because the full feasibility happens after the first approval from the committee, then they would need to also liaise with the contracting authority because there's a team that is formed between ourselves and the contracting authority that can provide certain guidance around certain areas. For example, there's data that they might require from the ministry, or there might be certain, some high-level guidance in terms of this is a direction that we would like to go. So that can be provided, but really the private party is the one that runs that feasibility.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. The digital space, right? Are there specific PPP opportunities or possibilities around digital? Because we've largely talked about hard infrastructure, right? So government ambition, 25,000 digital hubs, and so on and so forth. Is there opportunity for PPPs in the digital space?
I believe there are opportunities. The key thing is to make the proposal directly to the relevant contracting authority, because as I said earlier, it has to be in line with the national plan, with the strategic plan of that particular ministry. And so they're the only ones that can say where things are. Having said that, I believe some of those projects, how they've been conceptualized currently, maybe that there might be a budget or a grant that is being offered, maybe through a bilateral agreement. So the thing is to establish what stage that project is at the contracting authority early on to see whether there's room to engage, because it may be conceptualized. I've seen situations where there is a project that is conceptualized at some budget, but we know in this difficult fiscal environment, that project may not move ahead. So there might still be an opportunity to engage. Aside from that, I mean, we've seen some projects that have not necessarily come through the PPP. For example, the Kenya Pipeline Company has established a broadband infrastructure that's running along their wayleaves on, where the pipelines are, and that is being done in partnership with a private party under the PPADA, the normal traditional procurement act. So there are projects happening that way. On our side, what we've seen in terms of proposals, and some are still in our early stage of sort of conceptualization, that we have digital projects related to certain technology being used to create efficiency. For example, in relation to scanning of cargo at ports of entry, in relation, even the ETA, for example, initially was a PPP, but then moved on to a different department. So there are projects that are coming up related to technology that are for improving efficiency in various sectors.
Yeah. And I believe the same thinking would apply to sports as well, because I'm seeing a question coming through from someone, whether sports or entertainment could also be a candidate for PPP projects. And I'm thinking that should be a possibility if you look at infrastructure and so on.
Absolutely. We actually, again, early stage conversations. We've had meetings with parties that have been interested in doing something in sports and entertainment. And I think in this, the creative economy is sort of emerging as a key sector with, with the younger generations. It is an area that we really need that infrastructure built. It's also a big economic driver. Yes.
Fantastic.
For that sector, I would say maybe it would be some sort of concession, and that would be the typical structure.
A concession, okay. And for you, Somarine, there's a question here on the structure for AFDB working with regional projects under the REX. Is that something that you look at?
Oh, absolutely. And something we actually very much encourage. We also need to recognize that if our countries are also going to develop, and we must trade competitively, and there are key infrastructures that are very important for that. But also we must regionally integrate. The East African community has done well to invest in cross-border investment, cross-border infrastructure, to be able to reduce either transportation timelines or digitally integrate markets. And I think we need to do that at scale. So we actually have a regional operation window. So if a project can connect at least two countries together, that project is given higher priority and the price is even cheaper. So I think it's also important for us to expand our mind to, even if it may just be a road project. And I think a lot of people are like, it seems we're infrastructure focused. But don't look at a road project as just an asphalt construction from one line to another. A road today is becoming an integrated project that is expanding market opportunities from production site for agricultural products to consumer site. We've seen the case of roads being built and infrastructure investment, and real estate investment, it begins to thrive from nowhere. So a road then becomes an enabler in that context. It's not the end point in itself. So that is the way we look at it. And if we can connect communities, better, but if it can even connect countries, we actually give that priority. So we have a regional operational window that provides some of the cheapest capital for those kind of investment.
Thank you. There's a question here that I think is really important for us to address, even as much as I know we are running out of time. The person is asking whether we can share some insights. You can share some insights into how water projects can be deemed to be viable, i.e. self-paying, given that water is a fundamental right to a country's citizens who may not always be able to afford high tariffs. What would be your response to that?
All right, Christine, I'm going to go first, but let me take the simpler part of it. Then you come to the harder part. So look, we have to be honest. There has to be a hybrid, a middle point between water as a right and water as a commodity. And it's a middle ground. And why do I say that? Even in the poorest regions of the world, and I'm privileged to be involved in multiple projects in some of the most rural parts of the continent. Even in war-torn region, people are still paying for water. when it becomes a basic, in some cases, up to 40% of household income. So there's a willingness to pay, there's a capacity to pay. And I think that is very important in factoring that. What I think we should invest on is not just water for domestic use, but also water for industrial use. And when we combine that together in a way, we are able to find those who have the capacity and willingness to pay to be able to keep the business in a functioning state, but at the same time as well, we can combine other forms of capital, philanthropic capital, public capital, to be able to meet the demands of water using through the right-based approach. But water cannot be purely right-based. It has to be a combination of both that and as a commodity base. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Christine, do you want to add on to that?
Very little to add. I think he's answered quite comprehensively. But to support that, I would say also at the government level, the need to really spend some time thinking about their tariffs and how the tariff review process occurs. There's, as he mentioned, there's willingness to pay, and we talk about ability to pay. If you look at what a typical citizen in Nairobi pays for cubic meter of water, it's about a fifth of the cost of what somebody's paying in Northeastern. And that's because they're paying for water that may not even be treated water out of a jerry can. Their price could be as much as 5 times, and they pay it. So there might be a bit of a disconnect between what we believe to be affordable or that people are willing to pay and really what they must pay because they cannot live without water. Another thing is for us from a PPP perspective is really the need to secure bankability of projects by really addressing operational issues that do threaten that, like non-revenue water, and some of the governance issues around some of the water service providers. So where they need to become, as institutions, stronger financially, more credit-worthy, but also address the water losses that occur for technical reasons, that being that maybe there's burst pipes and the amount of money going into investing in that infrastructure is limited, but also looking at commercial losses where there's lack of metering for whatever reason and certain losses that are just not being reflected. When we secure bankability at the last mile level, then it makes a project at the upstream level, at the dam or abstraction level, a lot more feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. I think I'll take one last question and then we can close. The JKIA project, right, raised quite a bit of storm. And there's one of our participants here who's asking, what are the lessons that the government learned from that project? And are there any expected procedural, regulatory, or legal changes that are in tow to address the challenges that particular project presented?
Sure. There's definitely a number of lessons learned. I think the first and most obvious is government communication, because a lot brews in the background when there's improper, inadequate communication of what is going on. So in terms of the peoples that we could tell even from some of the discussions that the understanding of how PPPs work was not very clear. And so that's an area we're doing a lot more of. We have always been involved in public participation, but it was always a lot more localized to the project affected persons. So a lot of engagement with the people where the project will be, with some of the basically project affected persons. Now we are, because the PPP Act doesn't explicitly discuss public participation in terms of beyond project affected persons, we have now developed a circular, and that is already out in public, around public participation, and we draw that from the Constitution and the requirements of actually reporting what projects have been received, especially privately initiated proposals. At the contracting authority, they must report how many they've received, and there's clarity on which ones they've decided to progress with, so that there's clarity around that, but also clarity at the different stages as to what feasibilities may have been approved, what project cost there might be. That is something that is now at play. Also, there has been a delay for a while in terms of the passing of the PPP regulations. And so this is a time where we have actually not just pushing them again, which they should be going to Parliament soon, but really we have also taken the time to revise them on the basis of what came out of that period. In terms, aside from that, it really is clarifying and sort of activating certain aspects of the PPP Act, operationalizing some aspects that had not been fully operationalized. So our financing available for projects, what projects, making that clarity. We're in the process of developing a PPP manual that will be sort of a quick read, easier read for the public so that they're able to understand the process better.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And Christine, is there any intersection with the work that you do and the public asset disposal team? Is there any convergence at some point?
So you're talking about the team that is dealing with the privatizations.
Exactly.
For clarity. Yes. So that's the public. There is an intersection, not in terms of a scope. Privatizations fully sit with the public investment and asset management department, or rather State Department, and they handle any privatizations. Anything that is a public-private partnership then comes to us. Where the intersection is that because we're all part of National Treasury, when a contracting authority submits a project, whether it's on budget or they're anticipating it as a PPP, it is evaluated initially through the same funnel, whereby then, it comes in, a concept note would come in, and it would be looked at as to whether it goes to their side or our side. But even later, as we evaluate a project and realize that this is more suitable on budget or to be procured differently, a project that was with us might end up being with that section, not just because they deal with privatizations, but they're also responsible for any projects that are being procured and are going to be financed through the budget.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. We must bring this to an end now. I think we could go on, and the questions are coming in hard and fast. So as I mentioned, we will collate these questions and share them with our two experts. They will give us written submissions to the extent that they can, and we will share those out with those who participated in today's forum, together with the presentations. I hope that's okay. We can share the presentations as well, Christine, summary?
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So Christine, Nganga, Dr. Olufunzo Somorin, we want to thank you very, very much for your time, for sharing your insights and sharing your wisdom. I think we've all been edified. We have a much clearer understanding of the PPP space, and of course, the financing that supports projects within the PPP space. To members who joined us this morning, thank you so much for your attendance and for your participation. I wish each and every one of you a wonderful day ahead, and thank you. Bye for now.
And thank you very much for an excellent moderation. Thank you, Maxwell. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Nice day. Bye-bye.